The woman's threadbare coat offered scant protection against the biting wind as she fumbled for coins, hoping they'd be enough to buy a single slice of bread. The CO, a silent observer of the scene, simply stated with understated authority, "Sit down. Eat first." The late afternoon sun cast long, melancholic shadows across the quiet street, its golden fingers reaching into the humble sandwich shop tucked away in a forgotten corner of the neighborhood. Inside, the air hung heavy with the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread, mingling with the faint, nostalgic melody drifting from an old radio. The shop, named The Daily Bread, was unassuming, boasting only a handful of well-worn wooden tables and chairs. The bell above the door jingled, announcing the arrival of a slender young woman, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that did little to soften her worried expression. Beside her, a little girl, no older than 5, with bright, inquisitive eyes and rosy cheeks, clutched her mother's hand. The child wore a faded pink dress, its hem just grazing her knees, and a hand-me-down coat several sizes too large. Mila, her stomach singing a mournful tune of emptiness, looked up at her mother with unwavering trust. Era nervously scanned the small establishment, her gaze darting from table to table. A few patrons glanced up from their sandwiches, then quickly averted their eyes, resuming their meals. Era led Mila to the counter, her eyes lingering on the chalkboard menu. "Hi," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the strains of a jazz standard. Could I just buy one slice of bread, please?" The man behind the counter, a burly figure with a perpetually weary expression, hesitated. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't sell slices. Only full sandwiches." Era's fingers trembled as she reached into her pocket, retrieving a meager collection of coins. Nickels, a lone quarter, and a scattering of pennies lay in her palm. She counted them quickly, her cheeks flushing with shame. "I only have 87 cents, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "It's all I have today." Mila tugged at her mother's sleeve, her gaze fixed on the display of warm, golden rolls behind the glass. Era offered her a weak smile, gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her forehead. Her own stomach growled, a familiar ache she had grown accustomed to ignoring. The shopkeeper, his face etched with a mixture of pity and helplessness, stammered, I'm sorry, I really am, but it's just not how we do things here. Sit down. Eat first." The voice, calm, steady, and undeniably firm, emanated from a corner of the shop. Era turned, her eyes drawn to a lone figure seated at a table by the window. The man, dressed in a slightly disheveled dark gray suit. His tie loosened, possessed an air of quiet authority. His hair, tousled as if he had repeatedly run his hand through it, framed a kind face with steady, intelligent eyes. He wasn't flashy or imposing, but rather possessed a grounded presence, radiating a quiet strength. "Please," he repeated, his voice softer this time, laced with genuine warmth. "You and your daughter sit down and eat." Era hesitated, her pride warring with her desperation. But then she looked down at Mila, whose face was illuminated by a small, radiant smile, the first Era had seen in days. A smile that reached her eyes and banished the shadows that had taken residence there. Era nodded, surrendering to the moment. The man gestured towards his table, a silent invitation. She carefully guided Mila across the room, settling her into the chair across from him. The shopkeeper, visibly relieved, quickly placed a plate of warm bread and butter and 2 steaming bowls of soup on the table. "Thank you," Era whispered, her fingers still numb with cold as she sat. Mila swung her legs excitedly. The man extended his hand. "Callum," he said, his grip firm and reassuring. "Era," she replied, her own hand still chilled to the bone as she shook his. "And this is Mila." He smiled at the little girl. "Yes, she's 5, Era added. "I like pink and soup," Mila declared with a grin. Callum chuckled. "Excellent choices." Era watched as Mila eagerly dipped her bread into the soup, her eyes fluttering shut in pure bliss with each bite. A wave of overwhelming emotion washed over Era, relief, gratitude, and something far deeper. Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly turned her head, feigning a rub at her cheek. Callum remained silent, respecting her privacy. He simply returned to his sandwich, acting as if their impromptu meal were the most ordinary thing in the world. But there was a subtle intensity in his gaze, gentle and observant, as if he understood her struggles without needing to ask. Outside, the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Inside, at a table near the window, a stranger's simple act of kindness filled two empty stomachs and began to thaw a heart that had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Callum discreetly signaled to the server, requesting another bowl of hot soup and a sandwich, this time with extra cheese, especially for Mila. The little girl had already devoured half of her bowl, the warmth gradually restoring color to her cheeks. Era sat ramrod straight, her posture stiff and hesitant, as if she were waiting for someone to tap her on the shoulder and inform her that this moment of grace was not meant for her. "Do you live nearby?" Callum asked gently, his voice low and conversational. Era hesitated before offering a slow nod. "A few blocks from here. We're staying at the Old Harbor Motel, just until I can find something more stable." He didn't press for further details, simply acknowledging her words with another nod. The new bowl of soup arrived, sending wisps of steam into the air, accompanied by a soft, crusty roll. Callum pushed it towards her. "You don't have to," she began, her voice laced with apprehension. "I know," he replied, his eyes conveying a depth of understanding. She offered him a small, grateful smile and picked up her spoon. "I lost my job 3 months ago," she confessed in a near whisper, as if uttering the words too loudly might solidify their reality. "I used to work as a quality control technician at a food production facility, but the company downsized. Since then, I've applied everywhere, supermarkets, warehouses, office cleaning, but nothing yet. And rent at a real apartment." Her voice trailed off, the unspoken hardships hanging heavy in the air. Callum's face remained impassive, but his eyes reflected a quiet sympathy, steady and kind. He didn't flinch, didn't offer empty platitudes, just listened with unwavering attention. Era continued, her words gradually gaining momentum. "I sold most of what I had, jewelry my mother gave me, my old laptop, even Mila's toys, just to make it through the weeks. I didn't tell her why we had to move. I just told her we were going on a little adventure." At that, Mila looked up from her bowl. "I like adventures," she chirped cheerfully, completely oblivious to the burden her mother carried. Then, in a gesture of such pure, unadulterated generosity that it seemed to momentarily still the air around them, she tore a piece of bread from her roll and placed it carefully on her mother's plate. "For you, Mommy." Era's lips trembled, her resolve threatening to crumble. "Thank you, sweetheart." Callum watched silently, a subtle tightening in his chest, not born of sadness, but of profound admiration. There was an unbreakable strength in the quiet dignity Era possessed, even in the face of such adversity. And the selfless generosity of a child with so little, offering her only piece of bread, touched him in a place he hadn't felt in years. Mila giggled as a string of melted cheese stretched from her sandwich to her chin. Callum offered her a napkin, smiling as she wiped her face clumsily. As the meal neared its end, Era glanced at the few remaining coins in her coat pocket, the ones she had initially tried to use. She pulled them out and gently pushed them across the table. I know it's not enough, but please at least let me pay you back for the bread," she pleaded softly. "I can't take more than I already have." Callum looked at the coins, then back at her, his gaze unwavering. With a smooth, decisive motion, he pushed the coins back across the table and said with calm certainty, "I do not take money from people who know how to share, even if it's just a piece of bread." Era blinked, her throat tightening with emotion. She didn't know how to respond. No one had spoken to her with such genuine kindness in years, not without judgment, not without an ulterior motive. It wasn't simply the food or the warmth of the soup. It was the respect in his voice, the quiet way he made her feel seen, not pitted. She nodded, unable to articulate her gratitude, and tucked the coins back into her pocket. Across from her, Mila was humming softly, swinging her feet, full and content. For the first time in months, Era felt something stir within her chest. Not hope exactly, but something akin to it, something that felt like being human again. The sky outside had deepened to a smoky shade of blue as Callum stepped out of the sandwich shop. Era and Mila had already disappeared in the opposite direction, their silhouettes fading into the quiet evening. He stood for a moment, hands thrust deep in his coat pockets, before retrieving his phone. He dialed a familiar number. "Harper," he spoke, his voice calm and direct. His assistant's voice responded, crisp and efficient as always. "Yes, sir. There's someone I'd like you to look into discreetly. Her name is Era, no last name yet. She has a daughter, Mila, about 5 years old. They're staying at the Old Harbor Motel. She mentioned working as a quality control technician before being laid off. I need her full work history, certifications, anything relevant." A brief pause followed. Then Harper replied without a trace of surprise. "Understood. I'll start tonight." Callum ended the call without another word. Back inside the shop, the server was clearing the table when Callum noticed something folded neatly beside Era's seat. A small square of fabric, a handkerchief, white linen, slightly worn, but carefully stitched with delicate blue embroidery along the edge. The initials E.A. were sewn into one corner. He picked it up gently, rubbing the soft fabric between his fingers. The stitches were fine and even, a testament to the patience and skill of the person who had crafted it, perhaps late at night, after putting a child to bed. He slipped the handkerchief into his coat pocket, then walked out into the wind, the small piece of linen a tangible reminder of the woman and child he had encountered. 3 days crawled by. Era sat hunched in the corner of the cramped motel room, her knees drawn up to her chest as Mila napped soundly beside her. Her phone buzzed softly on the cracked nightstand. "Hello?" She answered tentatively. "Hi, is this Era Anderson?" A woman asked, her voice pleasant and professional. "I'm calling from Eden Fields Organics. You submitted an application with us a few weeks ago." Era blinked, her heart suddenly pounding in her chest. Yes, I did. Well, we would love to bring you in for an interview. We're currently filling a position in our quality assurance department, and your experience seems to align well with our requirements. Would you be available this Thursday morning?" Era could barely process the words. She had submitted dozens of applications, Eden Fields being one of the first. She had long since given up hope of hearing back, assuming her application had been lost in the digital abyss. "Yes," she stammered quickly, her voice almost breathless. "Yes, I can be there." "Wonderful. We'll email you the details shortly." As the call ended, Era stared blankly at the phone screen, her hands trembling. Mila stirred in her sleep, instinctively rolling closer to her, her tiny fingers brushing against her arm. Thursday arrived, draped in a shroud of gray and dampness. Era stood nervously in front of the Eden Fields headquarters, dressed in her best, albeit worn, gray slacks and a simple blouse that had faded with countless washes. She had meticulously laundered and ironed the outfit the night before, hoping to present herself as professional as possible. Her shoes, though scuffed, were clean. She took a deep breath, attempting to calm her racing pulse, before stepping into the lobby. The office was bright and airy, filled with lush green plants, light wood accents, and the subtle, invigorating scent of rosemary and mint. The receptionist greeted her with a warm smile and handed her a visitor's badge. The interview room was quiet and professional, the panel of 3 managers welcoming, yet undeniably discerning. They asked thoughtful questions about her previous roles, her understanding of food safety regulations, and her ability to manage inspection reports and audit checklists. Era answered clearly and concisely, avoiding embellishments or exaggerations. She didn't attempt to conceal her recent struggles, acknowledging the challenges she had faced. "I've worked under pressure," she stated with quiet conviction, "and I've learned how to maintain focus even when faced with uncertainty." The interviewers exchanged impressed glances. She wasn't flashy or overtly ambitious, but she was precise, humble, and possessed a clear competence. What Era didn't know was that her resume had been resurrected from the slush pile thanks to a quiet recommendation from someone whose opinion the company held in the highest regard. As she walked out of the building an hour later, the air seemed to smell a little sweeter, the sky a little brighter. She clutched her coat around her, her heart buoyed by a strange, unfamiliar sensation. Not certainty, but a powerful sense of possibility. The official offer letter arrived 2 days after the interview, delivered via email. Era read it over and over, scarcely daring to believe the words she was seeing. Asterisk quality assurance technician, full-time, benefits included. Start date, Monday. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked over at Mila, who was happily coloring at the small table in their motel room, wearing her beloved pink dress. "Mommy got the job," Era whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Mila looked up, her face erupting in a radiant grin. "Does that mean we can have cereal and milk again?" Era laughed through her tears, rushing to embrace her daughter in a tight hug. "Yes, sweetheart. And maybe even strawberries, too." Era's first day at Eden Fields Organics felt like stepping into an entirely new world, a world of opportunity and promise. She was issued a crisp, clean lab coat, a clipboard, and a proper name badge bearing her full name, Era Anderson. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. Not just a mother struggling to survive, but a woman reclaiming her place in the world she had once dreamed of. Her role was clearly defined: to monitor cleanliness, test product samples, and ensure that every step of the production process adhered to the stringent organic certification standards. It was meticulous work, demanding attention to detail, but she was adept at it. Her colleagues were quick to notice her calm demeanor and unwavering focus. Within her first week, her supervisor, a warm yet no-nonsense woman named Jeanette, remarked, "I don't know where you've been hiding, Era, but I'm certainly glad you're here." Adding to her sense of well-being, Mila was enrolled in the company's employee childcare program, a small, on-site preschool meticulously designed to support working parents. Each morning, Mila proudly sported her little pink backpack, thrilled at the prospect of making new friends and enjoying snacks that she didn't have to share from a solitary granola bar. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Era felt like they were constructing a life, not simply enduring each day. What she didn't know, what no one had disclosed, was that the compassionate stranger who had assisted her in the sandwich shop was, in fact, the CEO of Eden Fields Organics. Callum rarely visited the corporate headquarters, preferring to spend the majority of his time overseeing supply chain operations, visiting the farms that supplied the company, or working from his private office located in a separate district. His presence was respected, but relatively remote, akin to a silent guardian observing from afar. One seemingly ordinary Thursday afternoon, Era willingly volunteered to cover an extra shift. A minor delivery issue had caused a series of delays on the production line, and Jeanette requested that she stay slightly later to supervise the final inspection. Meanwhile, Mila had been collected from the preschool room by a temporary intern, tasked with waiting with her near the employee entrance. However, a tragic miscommunication, a simple oversight in the handoff, left Mila momentarily unattended when the intern was summoned inside to answer a pressing question. As fate would have it, Callum arrived at the facility that very day for a surprise walkthrough. Stepping out of his car, he immediately noticed a small figure sitting alone by the main gate, clinging tightly to a pink backpack. Her cheeks stained with the tracks of recent tears, she appeared utterly forlorn. Callum slowly approached her, kneeling to bring himself to her level. "Hey," he said softly, his voice gentle and reassuring. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, her eyes widening in recognition. "You're the sandwich man," she said with a sniffle. Callum smiled, a warm and genuine expression that lit up his face. "I am. And you're Mila, right?" She nodded, unable to muster a more elaborate response. "I lost Mommy." He offered her a bottle of water and extended his arms in a gesture of comfort. "Would it be all right if I carry you somewhere safe while we wait for her?" Mila didn't hesitate. She lifted her arms, her trust unwavering, and Callum carefully scooped her up, cradling her as if she were the most precious cargo in the world. He carried her to the security office, where he sat with her, engaging her in conversation, asking about her day, listening intently as she regaled him with tales of her pink crayon and how she had affectionately named it Princess Daisy. 10 agonizing minutes later, Era came rushing down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest, her eyes wide with panic. The instant she saw Mila sitting calmly in Callum's lap, her knees nearly buckled beneath her. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I didn't realize she wasn't with the staff. I assumed." "It's okay," Callum said gently, standing and handing Mila over to her relieved mother. "She's safe, and she's a very brave girl." Era looked at him, stunned. You work here?" His smile was modest, almost self-effacing. "In a way, yes." She hugged Mila tightly, overwhelmed by a flood of relief and a strange, nascent emotion she couldn't quite define. A complex mix of gratitude and the sudden, unnerving awareness that this man had now appeared in her life twice, both times during moments of profound need. As the days at Eden Fields grew longer, signaling the approach of the holiday season, a subtle but perceptible shift occurred in the nature of Era and Callum's interactions. It began with brief, polite exchanges during staff appreciation events, company-sponsored lunches, fall harvest celebrations, and small town hall meetings. Each time, Callum greeted her with the same quiet warmth and unwavering respect that he had displayed in the sandwich shop, always allowing her the space to initiate the conversation, never making her feel insignificant or intimidated. Initially, Era attributed his behavior to mere kindness, the same inherent goodness that had prompted him to assist her on that fateful afternoon. However, she gradually began to notice the smaller, more personalized gestures. A new set of coloring books and crayons materialized in Mila's cubby at the preschool, wrapped simply in brown paper. On another day, a small cup of strawberry yogurt, Mila's favorite treat, was left with her name carefully written on the lid. No sender, no accompanying note. Era inquired with the preschool teachers, but no one had witnessed who had left the gifts. Mila, of course, had no doubts whatsoever. "It's the sandwich man," she declared confidently one evening as they walked home. "He likes us." Era smiled, but remained silent, determined to remain grounded in reality. She had toiled too hard to allow herself to be swept away by fanciful notions. Callum was the CEO, kind and compassionate, undoubtedly, but still her employer, and she was a single mother with rent to pay, responsibilities to fulfill, and a daughter to raise. She simply couldn't afford the luxury of indulging in idle speculation about his intentions. Despite her best efforts, she found herself increasingly looking forward to the company events, to the possibility of catching a glimpse of him in the hallway or hearing his voice during morning rounds. Their conversations were never lengthy, but they invariably lingered in her thoughts long afterward. He inquired about Mila's favorite storybooks, and she revealed that Mila was particularly fond of fairy tales featuring courageous girls and happy endings. A few days later, Mila brought home a book entitled The Princess and the Garden Fox, tucked discreetly into her preschool bag without any explanation. Then came the evening that irrevocably altered the course of their relationship. They were at home, finishing dinner, a simple meal of macaroni and cheese with steamed broccoli, while Mila was contentedly drawing on the back of a discarded grocery receipt, filling the blank spaces with looping shapes created with her new crayons, humming softly to herself. Suddenly, she looked up, her expression earnest. "Mommy?" "Yes, sweetheart? Is the sandwich man Santa Claus?" Era blinked, completely taken aback by the unexpected question. "What? Well," Mila continued matter-of-factly, "he brings surprises, and he knows what I like, and he always makes you smile when you see him." She paused, squinting at her drawing with childlike intensity. "I think he's magic." Era stared at her daughter, her heart skipping a beat. For a moment, she was speechless, unable to formulate a coherent response. Mila, oblivious to her mother's internal turmoil, returned to her coloring, perfectly content. Era stood up and began clearing the plates, her hands moving almost mechanically. But her mind was racing, replaying every interaction she had had with Callum, searching for clues, for answers. She thought about his quiet, unwavering presence, the way he listened without interrupting or rushing to offer solutions. She considered the way he looked at Mila, not with condescending pity, but with genuine affection and respect. She recalled the way he looked at her, not with judgment or disdain, but with understanding and compassion. She couldn't deny that her heart beat faster whenever she heard his voice, and that her cheeks flushed with a warmth that had nothing to do with the room's temperature whenever their eyes met across a crowded room. And just like that, she realized something she had been desperately trying not to acknowledge. Her heart was stirring again, not out of desperation, not out of loneliness, but because something genuine and profound was quietly blossoming in the spaces between their shared silences, in the unspoken words, in the almost imperceptible glances. That realization terrified her more than anything had in a very long time. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Era's carefully constructed world tilted precariously, just enough to crack something open, to expose the raw, vulnerable emotions that she had been diligently suppressing. She was walking through the hallway outside the employee break room, carrying a stack of freshly printed quality reports, when she inadvertently overheard two junior staff members gossiping near the vending machine. She wasn't deliberately eavesdropping, but their voices, filled with youthful indiscretion, carried with an unmistakable clarity. "I heard it straight from Jeanette," one of them said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "She said Era got the job because the CEO personally flagged her resume." "No way," the other replied, her tone skeptical. "He barely gets involved in hiring decisions. She must have really made an impression." Era stopped abruptly, her fingers tightening on the stack of papers. She turned sharply and walked away, before they had a chance to notice her presence. The remainder of the day unfolded in a daze. She performed her inspections on autopilot, nodding absently when spoken to, answering questions with only half of her attention engaged. That evening, she sat in their small kitchen, staring blankly at the dinner she had prepared, a meal that she couldn't bring herself to eat. So, it hadn't been her qualifications that had secured her position. It hadn't been her hard-earned experience, her carefully rehearsed interview answers, or her unwavering persistence. It had been him, Callum, pulling strings behind the scenes, orchestrating her success without her knowledge. A slow burn of resentment began to rise in her chest, not ungratefulness, certainly never that, but something far more complex and unsettling. A sharp pang of wounded pride, a sense of being indebted, of being helped without her explicit consent, of believing that she had climbed a rung on the ladder of success through her own efforts, only to discover that someone had been secretly holding the ladder steady the entire time. She glanced at Mila, who was sitting on the floor nearby, engrossed in a game with her beloved stuffed rabbit, completely oblivious to the storm brewing within her mother's heart. That night, Era barely slept, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts and emotions. The next morning, she found herself standing hesitantly outside Callum's private office, her heart pounding erratically. The receptionist cast her a curious glance, but didn't attempt to intervene. Summoning her courage, she knocked once, then opened the door when she heard his voice. Callum looked up from behind his desk, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Era?" She stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Was it you?" Her voice didn't tremble, but it was thin and tight, betraying the anxiety that gripped her. "Were you the one who got me this job?" Callum's expression remained unchanged. He calmly set down his pen, acknowledging the gravity of her question. "Yes." No hesitation, no attempt at evasion, no elaborate explanation. Just a simple, unadorned confession. Era swallowed hard, struggling to maintain her composure. "Why?" He slowly rose from his chair and walked towards the window, gazing out at the cityscape before turning back to face her. His eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "When I was 10 years old," he began, his voice even and devoid of self-pity. "My mother and I were homeless for nearly a year." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. She had left an abusive relationship and worked 3 low-paying jobs, struggling to keep us afloat. Some nights, she would forego eating so that I could have a proper meal. She sewed clothes for other families late into the night, her fingers pricked and bleeding. She was, without a doubt, the strongest person I have ever known. His voice softened, reflecting the profound impact his mother had had on his life. One day, a stranger offered her a job, without asking any questions, without demanding any explanations. That single act of kindness, that one job irrevocably changed our lives. It restored her dignity, which she had almost lost. It gave her the opportunity to breathe again, to reclaim her sense of self-worth. He paused, his eyes locking with hers, conveying the depth of his conviction. I never forgot that. I saw you and Mila in that sandwich shop, he continued. And I saw my mother, not identical certainly, but similar. I simply couldn't turn away. His voice took on a resolute quality. So, I made sure your resume found its way to the appropriate hands. That's all. Era stood motionless, her arms wrapped protectively around herself, as if she needed to physically contain the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. I wanted to earn this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I needed to believe that I could stand on my own 2 feet. Callum's voice softened, becoming almost tender. You did earn it, Era. I merely moved a piece of paper. You showed up. You convinced the interviewers that you were the right person for the job. You do the work day in and day out. All I did was provide an opportunity. Her lip trembled, threatening to betray the emotions she was struggling to control. I didn't want to feel like someone's project, she said, her voice laced with vulnerability. Callum's gaze was unwavering, his voice firm and reassuring. You are no one's project, Era. You are a strong, capable woman who deserves every success she achieves. A heavy silence settled between them, filled with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. And then, slowly, a glistening film began to gather in her eyes. Not the sharp sting of anger, but the heavy, almost unbearable weight of being truly seen. To have someone look past the surface, acknowledge the struggles, and still offer respect. It was a profound and disarming experience. She instinctively covered her mouth with one hand, as if to contain the sudden rush of emotion, and began to cry. Quiet, aching tears that spoke of exhaustion and relief. Callum, sensing her vulnerability, took a hesitant step forward, the soft music, melody from the shop radio momentarily unnoticed, but refrained from touching her. He simply stood close, offering his unwavering presence, a silent promise of support, just as he had that day in the sandwich shop. In that moment, a profound realization washed over Era. This man had never attempted to rescue her in the traditional sense. He hadn't swooped in with grand gestures or empty promises. Instead, he had simply refused to let her remain invisible, a faceless statistic in a world that often overlooked those in need. It was a typically quiet Wednesday afternoon when Mila, her small legs swinging beneath her, sat at the miniature table tucked away in the corner of her bustling preschool classroom. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, a pink crayon clutched tightly in one hand, her well-loved stuffed rabbit, Barnaby, nestled securely under her other arm. The teacher, Miss Riley, a woman with a perpetually kind smile and an endless supply of patience, knelt beside her, her presence a comforting reassurance. Mila leaned in close, her voice a shy whisper, as if sharing a precious secret. Can you help me write a letter? She asked, her eyes wide with earnest appeal. Of course, sweetheart. Miss Riley responded, her voice gentle. Who's it for? Mila paused for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought as she considered the question. Then, a radiant smile bloomed on her face, chasing away the earlier seriousness. The sandwich man. Miss Riley's smile deepened, a warmth spreading through her. All right then. Music. Let's write it together. Mila dictated every word with meticulous care, her voice soft yet surprisingly sure, as if each syllable held immense importance. Miss Riley, carefully attending to the little girl's dictation, transcribed the words neatly onto a crisp piece of lined paper. Once the message was complete, she guided Mila's hand as she painstakingly drew a large, slightly lopsided, but undeniably heartfelt heart at the bottom of the page. That afternoon, when Era arrived to pick up Mila, Miss Riley discreetly handed her a folded sheet of paper. Mila wrote something today. I thought you might want to see it before she tries to mail it. As Mila skipped ahead down the brightly lit hallway, her pigtails bouncing with each step, Era unfolded the letter with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The simple words jumped out at her, etched in a child's innocent script. Music. Dear Sandwich Man. Asterisk, thank you for helping my mommy and me have yummy food. You make my mommy smile now. I wish you could be my daddy. Asterisk, love, Mila. Era stopped abruptly in her tracks, the cheerful sounds of the preschool fading into a muted background hum. The hallway, which had moments before seemed vibrant and full of life, suddenly felt too quiet, too still, the air thick with unspoken emotions. She carefully folded the letter, creasing the paper along its original lines, and held it tightly to her chest for a long moment, as if trying to contain the whirlwind of feelings it had unleashed. Her heart thudded in her ears, a loud and confusing rhythm that echoed the turmoil within. That night, after Mila had finally drifted off to sleep, curled up in her favorite pink blanket, Barnaby the rabbit nestled beside her. Era sat alone at the small, worn kitchen table, the single overhead light casting a pool of illumination on the note that lay before her. Music. She stared at the simple yet profound words for a long time, tracing the loops and curves of the childish handwriting with her fingertip. The words weren't hers. They came from the purest of places, a child's heart. Simple, honest, unfiltered, and utterly without guile. Yet, somehow, they resonated deep within her, echoing a longing, a hope, a possibility that she hadn't dared to voice, even to herself. The next morning, fueled by a mixture of trepidation and a fragile sense of hope, she took the letter with her to work, tucking it carefully into her purse. She waited until mid-morning, when she knew Callum would be in his small, cluttered office, poring over spreadsheets and invoices. Taking a deep breath, she knocked once on the door and stepped inside without waiting for an answer, her heart pounding in her chest. Music. He looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration, his expression shifting from surprise to something that bordered on welcome. Era didn't speak, her throat suddenly constricted with nerves. She crossed the small room slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, and placed the folded letter on the edge of his cluttered desk, right beside a stack of papers and a half-empty coffee mug. Then, she stepped back, clasping her hands tightly in front of her, her face an unreadable mask. Callum looked at her, his gaze searching, questioning, then down at the page that lay before him. He unfolded it carefully, as if handling a precious artifact, and read every word, his expression shifting subtly as he absorbed the child's message. His eyes softened, the corners crinkling slightly. His expression shifted, a quiet transformation from professional reserve to something far more vulnerable and touched, yet still retaining that inherent steadiness that Era had come to rely on. When he finally looked up, his voice, music, was barely above a whisper, laced with a sincerity that resonated deep within her. If you'll let me, I would be honored to be that for her. Era didn't cry this time, although tears threatened to spill. Instead, she simply nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but one that spoke volumes. And something in the room, something old and cautious, a barrier built of fear and self-doubt, finally let go, dissolving into the space between them. The season's music unfolded gently into one another, a tapestry of changing colors and subtle shifts, and with them came the steady, comforting rhythm of a new life, a life built not on grand gestures or fleeting infatuation, but on the quiet, unwavering foundation of genuine connection. Callum, Era, and Mila had grown into a family, not through dramatic pronouncements or elaborate ceremonies, but through the accumulation of ordinary moments, the countless small acts of love and kindness that slowly, painstakingly stitched their lives together into a cohesive whole. They moved into a modest cottage music on the edge of town, a cozy haven with faded blue shutters and a welcoming front porch. Its backyard, though small, was just big enough for a vegetable patch, carefully tended rows of tomatoes and peppers, and a sturdy wooden swing that Callum had lovingly hung from the branch of an old, sprawling oak tree. On weekends, the three of them worked side by side in the garden, a tableau of domestic contentment. Mila, inevitably, in her ever-present pink dress, her hands and face smudged with dirt. Era, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her hands protected by worn gardening gloves, her brow furrowed in concentration as she coaxed life from the earth. And Callum, his sleeves rolled up, a wide smile gracing his face as dirt clung to his hands, the picture of quiet satisfaction. Evenings became sacred, a time for connection and shared laughter. They cooked together, the aroma of simmering sauces and freshly baked bread filling the cozy cottage. They laughed, sharing stories of their day, the mundane and the meaningful intertwined. And they always, without fail, made time to eat at the same table, a conscious act of unity in a world that often pulled people apart. Life still had its challenges, the inevitable bumps and bruises that came with navigating the complexities of work and family, but none of it felt quite so heavy anymore, because none of it was faced alone. They had each other, a solid anchor in the unpredictable storms of life. Era, music, blossomed under the warmth of their shared love and support. No longer the uncertain, hesitant new hire, constantly questioning her abilities and worth, she had grown into a confident and respected team leader, known throughout Eden Fields for her sharp focus, her unwavering dedication, and her remarkable grace under pressure. Where there was once hesitation in her voice, a lingering self-doubt that colored her every interaction, there was now a quiet assurance, a deep-seated belief in her own capabilities. She no longer questioned her place within the company. She had earned it, brick by brick, through hard work and unwavering determination. Then came the 5th anniversary of Eden Fields, a milestone that marked not just the passage of time, but the realization of a dream. The warehouse, usually a bustling hub of activity and organized chaos, was transformed for the evening into a warm, glowing space, a testament to the power of community and shared success. String lights twinkled overhead, casting a soft, romantic glow on the harvest-themed centerpieces that adorned each table. The air hummed with the sound of lively conversation, punctuated by the gentle strains of music playing softly in the background. Employees from across the company gathered to celebrate, their faces flushed with pride and camaraderie. Near the end of the evening, music as the speeches concluded and the formal festivities began to wind down, the lights dimmed, casting the room in a more intimate light. Callum, looking surprisingly at ease, stepped onto the small stage that had been erected at one end of the warehouse. He wore a soft gray sweater, the epitome of understated elegance, and dark jeans, a deliberate choice that conveyed approachability and authenticity. No tie, no flash, just a calm, steady presence that commanded attention without demanding it. "I want to tell you a story." "Music?" he began, his voice resonating with sincerity, cutting through the lingering chatter. "It happened 5 years ago, before this building existed, before we had sprawling warehouses or fleets of trucks." The room fell still, all eyes focused on the man on the stage. "There was a woman," he said, his voice filled with a quiet reverence, "who came into a small sandwich shop with her daughter. She asked for one slice of bread. Just music one. It was all she could afford." Era's breath caught in her throat, a wave of emotion washing over her as she recognized the scene he was painting, the memory both poignant and bittersweet. "That day," Callum continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, "I saw more courage and grace in that woman than I've ever seen in any boardroom. She didn't ask for pity, didn't seek special treatment. And when her little girl, without hesitation, offered to share her meager portion, I realized I wasn't witnessing poverty. I was witnessing love, the kind that teaches quietly and powerfully, the kind that binds people together even in the face of adversity." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd, a warmth spreading through his gaze as he connected with the individuals before him. He didn't name her, didn't point her out, didn't feel the need to explicitly identify the woman he was speaking about. He didn't music need to. The truth resonated far beyond the spoken word. As the spotlight, seemingly guided by an unseen hand, drifted across the audience. It settled on Era, illuminating her face with a gentle glow. She froze, her eyes wide with surprise, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of warmth and embarrassment. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the people around her began to rise, clapping, not out of sympathy or pity, but out of genuine respect, admiration for her strength, and gratitude for her unwavering commitment to the company. Her team, her colleagues, music, even the senior managers stood, honoring not her past struggles, but her present triumphs, the resilience she had demonstrated, and the positive impact she had made on the lives of those around her. And music then, from the front row, a small, clear voice rose above the applause, piercing the air with its innocent pronouncement. "Daddy!" Mila, standing precariously on her chair in her ever-present pink dress, her face alight with unadulterated joy, waved both arms enthusiastically toward the stage, her smile stretching wide, a beacon of pure love and adoration. Callum's eyes lit up, his face softening as he smiled back at his daughter, his heart overflowing with affection. In that moment, everything else faded away. The lights, the applause, the crowd of well-wishers. It was just them again, the three of them, connected by an invisible thread of love and belonging. A family forged in the crucible of hardship and bound together by the simple acts of kindness that had shaped their lives. Later that night, back at the cozy cottage that had become their sanctuary, they sat around the crackling fire pit in the backyard, the flames casting dancing shadows on their faces. The trees surrounding the property glowed with the warm hues of autumn, the leaves shimmering gold in the firelight, and the air was filled with the comforting scent of wood smoke and cinnamon, a fragrance that spoke of home and hearth. Music. They shared a loaf of freshly baked bread, still warm from Callum's Sunday baking routine, a quiet ritual that honored where their story had begun, the humble origins from which their family had sprung. Mila, her eyelids heavy with sleep, lay curled against Era's side, her small body nestled comfortably against her mother, still clutching a half-eaten crust of bread in one hand, a tangible reminder of the simple act of kindness that had changed their lives forever. Callum reached across the space that separated them and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind Era's ear, his touch light and tender. She looked at him, her eyes soft with gratitude and a love that ran deeper than words, and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." He took her hand in his grip firm and reassuring. "I didn't just see you," he said, his voice low and filled with emotion. "I was waiting for you." The fire crackled merrily beside them, sending sparks dancing into the night sky. Stars blinked into existence, one by one, their light joining the soft glow of the flames. And in that small, unassuming backyard, a mother, a daughter, and a man who had once offered a single slice of bread, sat quietly, sharing more than just food. They shared a life, a love, a family forged in the crucible of hardship and sustained by the unwavering power of human connection. A single slice of bread had started it all, a catalyst for change, a testament to the profound impact of even the smallest acts of kindness. Now they had everything: love, laughter, and a future filled with hope. Thank you for joining us on this heartwarming journey. Music. A story sparked by one small act of kindness and transformed into something lasting. If it touched your heart or reminded you of the power of compassion, we invite you to stay connected. Hit that like button and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more real-life tales that uplift and inspire. Your support helps us continue sharing the moments that move souls and light the way for others. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and music, remember, even the smallest gesture can change someone's world.